Hello, my name is Horam, and today I have found a few strange encounters people have experienced with the various mythical and supernatural forces of the world from multiple subreddits, and I will be narrating them here. But before we begin, I did want to ask that if you end up enjoying my narrations, then please do consider liking and subscribing, as that really does help the channel a lot. But either way, without any further ado, let's get into the narrations. The first story has been posed by user Yule Fox. As a young teen, I lived a very strange situation in the woods. I'm not sure if this encounter may have been some kind of entity, or perhaps something more natural. I hope someone can give me more information about what happened to me and my friend. I was around 12 years old at the time, and one of my best friends, let's call him Alex, must have been 10. His father had purchased a large amount of forested land, around 100 kilometers away from the city, I'd say. We lived in Montreal, Canada. It was all forest when Alex's family acquired it. They cleared a little patch to build a house, and the rest was pure, unalterated forest. Their land was cut in two by a dirt road that, if you followed it for several kilometers, led to a few houses. And their land was very different depending on which side of the dirt road you looked. On the right side, where their house was, the forest was light and luminous, or at least it felt that way. It wasn't too dense, with little rolling hills. It was a lovely place to play. On the left side of the road, it was another story. First, there was a deep ditch, perhaps 2 meters deep, which then became quite high and a steep hill. Weirdly enough, all along the road, the ditch was full of car parts. A set of car wheels here, a door there, a steering wheel way over there, all old and overgrown with moss. And over the steep hill, the forest gave off a really bad vibe. It had lots of very tall, dark trees with almost black trunks, and the place seemed somehow devoid of life. Climbing the hill, which we seldom were willing to do because of the creeps it gave us, there was some sort of swamp there. When we were there, we felt this sort of strange pressure. We sensed a kind of animal instinct that told us to leave. The strange atmosphere was spontaneously obvious to both me and Alex, and we playfully called that side of the road the Demon's Forest. One weekend day, probably in 2001 or 2002, my family and I came to visit Alex's family. Bored by the adults, my friend and I decided to go and play in the forest. Alex's father told us to watch out, because there had been an animal that was running around and rummaging in their trash bins and causing other nuisances. He said it was a dog that looked somewhat like Rottweiler that surely belonged to someone living up the dirt road. He warned us that we shouldn't interact with the dog if we saw it, as it did not look healthy, at least as far as he could tell, or something was weird about it. He said it somehow looked diseased or contagious and had patches of fur missing. I can't remember exactly what he said. And so we set out on our walk. It was autumn, and the leaves were pretty and golden. Many have already fallen to the ground. It was a calm, slightly overcast, windless day. The air was very still and calm. Alex and I decided to walk along the dirt road, with a pleasant section of the forest to our right, and the Demon's Forest to our left. We chatted while following the road as it was rising up a slope. As usual, we were slightly creeped out going up the road because of the weird vibes of the forest to the left side, but we were challenging ourselves to be brave and trying to not really think about how unsettling it felt. A good distance away from our home, when it was already well out of sight, I noticed the first strange thing of the day. Out of the steep hill on the left side of the road, there was a very large and dark pine tree hanging over the road. Somebody had attached a pink ribbon to one of the branches, which was already strange since this was the territory of Alex's family and they had no daughters or other little girls likely to hang around, or other people who may be the owners of pink ribbons who were likely to hang out in this deserted road. The strange thing was, the ribbon was flailing strongly in the wind. Its loose ends were flapping, almost horizontally. But the thing is, it was a completely windless day. There was no wind to speak of. The ribbon was within my reach, so I even touched it as it was flailing. I even licked my finger and held it in the air to check if I could feel any wind or current of air at all, as my dad had taught me. The air was perfectly still, yet the ribbon flailed. I mentioned it to my friend, but he seemed distracted and was younger than me and sometimes didn't quite catch on to what I was saying, so I didn't press the matter. We continued our climb, and so we reached a place where the hill on the left side of the road had a gentler slope and began further away from the road. In fact, it looked as if the hill was kind of carved out in a way that would have made it easy for us to climb to get into the Demon's Forest. It almost seemed as if the hill was carved in a sloping half circle like in a theater, and the road we stood on would have been the stage. It gave us a very clear, treeless view of the hillside, full of golden and red fallen leaves. The trees began at the top of the hill, maybe 9 meters higher. We stopped to admire the view. Canadian autumns are a sight to behold. Alex suddenly got really excited. He thought he heard something in the demon woods up the hill, and he really wanted me to pay attention. He explained that there are wild cats in that forest. They had spotted them with his dad, and one of them had reportedly had kittens. Kittens being one of the most exciting things in the world for kids our age, getting us all riled up. But for some reason, even thinking about the kittens, I just couldn't really relax. He actually thought he had heard the cat meow in the forest up the hill close by. I heard nothing of the sort though, and thought he was just making it up. He strongly suggested that we try meowing at it to see if it would respond. Maybe it would even bring its kittens along and we could see them and play with them. At least, that's what he thought. I hadn't heard any sounds at all, and didn't really like his idea of screaming meows into the creepy forest. What kind of wild cat would respond to human children anyway? Wouldn't it be obvious that we are not cats by the sound of us? That just seemed like a dumb idea to me. Before I could try and talk him out of it, he started to loudly meow into the forest. To my utter shock, something meowed back. Alex was delighted, so he meowed again, and something answered. I was actually shocked. This didn't make any sense to me, and it creeped me out. but I suspended my disbelief to see what would happen. He kept meowing over and over, and for every one of his meows, there was one coming back in response from the woods. Something felt off to me. Feral or wild animals don't behave this way. Even at 12 years old, I realized that. And it wasn't an echo. The cat did not bounce back any sound that we threw at it, except meows, which it reciprocated immediately. And anyway, there were no hard rocky surfaces around off of which sound could bounce off and create an echo. Everything was covered in a soft layer of sound-dulling leaves. Alex got even more excited and yelled, "Listen, the cat is coming towards us. She's coming to see us with her kittens." And to my surprise, he was right. There was a rustle of dead leaves coming from above us, from above the slope in the creepy forest. It seemed like the rustling was getting closer to us. But it was way off, because cats are small and light and careful with their steps. They don't make a ruckus when they walk through the woods. But here, the rustling leaves sounded extremely obvious, along with the meowing. And in fact, it sounded more like steps, like someone with two legs walking in the leaves, and it was getting closer to us. My alarm signals were starting to go off with the wrongness of it all, while my younger friend was oblivious. He was calling it more and more, noticing that it was coming closer. Then I realized what seemed so wrong. The sound was coming closer to us, but there was nothing to be seen. Right in front of us we had a gently sloping hill, treeless and clearly visible. Anything coming from the forest should have been plainly exposed to view. There was nothing. No source for the rustling sound. Nothing moving. "Oh, her kittens are joining her. Listen, there are more sounds. They're coming to play with us." He was right. The walking sounds seemed to have multiplied and now came from various directions at once, ever getting closer, with nothing being visible. Something was way off. I wanted to leave, but Alex was getting mad at me. The kittens were almost here and he wanted to see them, he insisted. At this point, it was extremely tense, and fight or flight was activating from the wrongness of it all. We were alone and quite exposed on this theater stage to whatever was getting closer to us, which was more and more obviously with every moment not kittens. I was on the verge to force him to go and run home. And then, suddenly, I heard a very loud, panting sound right at my feet. During the next millisecond, I got only mildly surprised. We had a huge husky at home. I was used to it panting next to my feet. But then, a sense of profound dread dawned on me as I realized that, obviously, my dog was not here, and it must be another dog, a very big one by the sound of it, right at my feet. I panickingly looked down, ready to jump away from the dog that somehow got so close to me, almost on me, without noticing. Only there's absolutely nothing at my feet, but I still hear the loud, breathy panting sound coming from there. I whirl around all 360 degrees, screaming. Where is it coming from? There's nothing at my feet or anywhere around me. There is nothing there, yet the sound clearly is. As I whirl about in a frenzy, I look up the dirt road we were following. Around 100 meters away, on the top of the slope, I see a lone dog standing. It looks somewhat similar to a Rottweiler, but in very, very bad shape. Extremely unkempt, with patches of fur missing, shaggy and dirty as heck, with some skin exposed where the fur is missing. It looks down on us as well. Obviously, there is no way that I could hear it panting in that distance, and the source of that sound's at my feet. At that point, the flight instinct wins inside me. I have never run as desperately and as fast in my whole life. Thank goodness it was all downhill. Alex kept pace right beside me, terrified. We made it home in one piece. We didn't walk in those woods anymore. I came back to Alex's place several times in my life, but I never wanted to walk in those woods ever again. We had amazing parties at his house as teens. I was often there, rather drunk and having a great time, but I always had this very stressful sensation when I went out of his house, especially at night. When I slept over there, I had these extremely strange experiences where, when I woke up, I sensed as if something was there and was observing me. In my mid-awake state, I even saw something floating near the ceiling. It had the sensation that it was not an immediate threat though. It was as if it was observing. I am not sure that whatever this is was related to what happened on the dirt road though. We never discussed what happened that day. As I research it now, I see that this land is historically Algonquin land. Perhaps that somehow ties in together. The next story has been posed by user fat_casual. So, I don't typically believe this kind of stuff, but I had a very strange encounter a little while back that I was telling my coworker about, and they insisted I saw a rake? I've been doing some research since, and I have no idea what it was, and it looks very similar to what I saw, except from what I've read, it's a fictional creature from a creepypasta. Just learned about what that is as well, so I'm not entirely sure what I saw at all. Anyways, I was driving home from work about a month or so ago, and was heading down this typically busy side street in Douglas County, Colorado, called Havana. It's kind of close to the Centennial Airport, in a business district surrounded by apartments. It was 1:30 a.m., and there wasn't a lot of traffic out, just a Jeep in front of me. As I was driving around a bend in the road, where Dry Creek turns into Havana, I saw in my peripheral vision this figure to my right by the sidewalk standing between two small trees. The creature was standing kind of behind them. At first glance, I figured that it was just a big, slender dog, like a white greyhound or maybe a Great Dane that escaped and seemed to be standing and barking at traffic by the sidewalk. I was going about 45 miles per hour when I passed, and it was dark out, but noticed as I began to pass by that it appeared to have a humanoid-shaped head and pitch black eyes. a bent over hunched back, long slender legs, and an unusually wide stretched mouth, like it was screaming. I thought to myself, what the hell is that? So I slowed down quickly to look back, and in my mirror I saw the creature turn around and run off towards a brick retaining wall on the other side of the sidewalk. But as it ran off, I saw how tall and slender the creature was. It seemed very pale, almost gray, with a kind of anorexic and bony appearance. It also moved very strangely, where its hind leg joints were inverted and bent in the opposite direction from its front legs. At that point, I was seriously creeped out. The jeep in front of me had also slowed down, so I could only assume they saw it as well. We both continued driving, as it was quite late, and couldn't stop in the middle of a busy road. But that situation really made my skin crawl. I kept checking my mirrors for the rest of the drive home, and debating if I should have just called a non-emergency line to have an officer check it out. But I told myself they would think that I was just an idiot. Now, every night when I take that road, I look around if I can spot it again. I really want to believe that it was just some dog, but I can't stop thinking about how strange and quickly it moved with its backwards knees, and how long its mouth stretched. I haven't talked about this much except to some family and my coworker because, quite frankly, it just sounds ridiculous. I'm just wondering, what did I actually see? And if it's something should I even be worrying about? Or talking about? Maybe I should just continue to pretend I never saw anything and just move on with my life. The next story has been posed by user unique_bus397. Let me start this by saying that I fully believe in the paranormal. I have always believed the stories and fully welcome the opportunity to experience its happening to me. Despite this, I have never had a paranormal experience until 2 years ago, and I haven't really had one since either. For context, I live in very rural Alabama, and when I say very rural, I mean even the closest Dollar General is almost 20 minutes away. I live at the foot of a heavily wooded mountain. The further you drive up, the less populated it becomes. Even though I lived in this spot for my entire life, I had never driven up the mountain, just because there was no need. The city was in the opposite direction of the mountain, and from what I knew about going up, you just drove up and passed a few houses and eventually hit a dead end and would have to turn around. Well, one day I had a friend over and we decided we wanted to hop on my golf cart and take a little joyride up the mountain. We drove for about 30 minutes. Granted, this cart only goes about 25 miles per hour max. And we had only really seen some beautiful forests and passed a couple of properties. But at this point we came upon a spot in the road with a clearing off to the right. As we got closer, I realized it was a cemetery. I pulled over into the cemetery and turned my golf cart off. The main reason for this was curiosity. I had no idea there was a cemetery up the mountain, and it was strange to me considering we barely had anyone living on the mountain, much less this far up. So my friend and I hop out of the cart and start walking towards the graves. Like I said, I fully believe in spirits and being respectful towards the dead, but my friend didn't, at the time at least. So I'm respectfully looking around, reading the markers, attempting to stay a 6 foot distance from the headstones, so I wasn't walking on top of the graves. Well, here my friend goes, on her phone, walking all over the graves. I think she even cracked a couple of jokes about the names on some of the headstones. Some of them were kinda weird, to be fair, considering the people died in the late 1800s and early 1900s. After I've sufficiently explored, I start to walk back towards the cart. Aloud, I declare, half jokingly, "Thank you, ghosts, for letting us walk around your space. Sorry we trampled all over your graves." My friend yells at me, "F them ghosts." I just rolled my eyes, but honestly, I felt a slight shiver down my spine after she said it. I was kind of nervous at this point. We both hopped back in the golf cart, and I turned the key, and, of course, it wouldn't start. I turned the key multiple times, but it seemed like the battery was dead. For the 3 years I had owned this golf cart, I never had an issue with it. So, in my non-skeptic brain, I immediately felt that this was happening because of what my friend said about the graves. But honestly, at this point, I was scared. I didn't want to believe what I was thinking, so I decided to call my dad for help. I checked my service and I had 2 bars, so I was good on cell signal. I called him, and the phone rang 5 times before he answered. I heard nothing on the other end, so I said, "Hello," and I could hear heavy, raspy breathing in response. As soon as my brain slightly processed what I was hearing, my dad hung up. I tried to call him back, but my cell signal had now dropped off completely, even though I hadn't moved at all. So at this point, even my friend looked scared. We're both thinking the same thing. I'm beginning to hyperventilate, and I lay my head down on the steering wheel, and I just begin to pray out loud for protection and help starting the car. I tell my friend to pray as well, and she says, "Please let the car start. I'm sorry for what I said." I turn the key, the car starts, and I peel out of there as fast as possible. When I get home, my dad is outside working on one of his projects. My friend and I walk up to him and I ask him why he hung up on me, because I needed his help. He said that he never received a call from me. I told him that's impossible because he picked up and I heard him breathing over the phone. He showed me his recent calls, and he had no calls or missed calls from me. This was almost 3 years ago, and I haven't been back to the cemetery or had any other paranormal experiences since. While pondering the mysteries of the unknown, we recognize that our journey of discovery is far from over. The vastness of our world humbles us, reminding us that there are countless wonders yet to be explored. It is in the embrace of the unknown that we find the essence of our curiosity and the drive for continued exploration. But either way, I do hope you enjoyed my narrations, and even if you didn't, I want to wish you a good rest of your day.